Hey everyone, it's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Thank you for being with me. Today we have an exceptional time. Today we are at 3 p. Pacific time and 6 p. Eastern time, but usually you can find me here weekdays, Monday through Friday from at 1 p.m. live on Jane Unchained. Again, it's the Plant-Based Business Hour, and I'm so happy that you are here with me because, as you know, I've started this show because I'm concerned that people aren't making the connection between COVID-19 and coronavirus times and eating meat. And as we all look towards the new big ideas of the future to get us away from meat and dairy, I am just concerned that perhaps we would take a step backwards after being quarantined, all of us, for about 6 weeks and not learn our lessons. So I really wanted to create a platform where consumers and investors could hear from the entrepreneurs and even maybe the big businesses that are turning their Titanic ships and getting into creating a solid, stable, safe food supply for the future. And as we all know, that's plant-based foods. So that's what we do here on the Plant-Based Business Hour. Thanks for being with me. Today, in fact, we are talking about big ideas. It's the general partner and the founder of Big Idea Ventures, Andrew Ive. He is here with us from New York. Andrew, thanks for joining me.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me.
So there's so much that I want to talk about. Are we really going to see the death of meat and dairy? What you're seeing from your particular vantage point as a business accelerator and a venture capital fund, and then what you're seeing on a global scale, and what you're seeing the new big ideas from entrepreneurs. But before we get into all those details, let me at least explain to people what Big Idea Ventures is. So you are an accelerator program, as I said, which is you'll take those small businesses, those entrepreneurs with the big ideas, and you'll really help them. This is how you're different from other places. You'll really help them work out all the kinks, test their ideas in a test kitchen. You give them mentors and advisory boards, and then as they come out of that, you fund them to a certain degree. So it's very exciting what you do.
It is. I love hanging out with entrepreneurs every day. I'm getting paid to do something that I love to do, which is always the best way.
And you really do have your finger on the pulse here. I believe I saw on your website that you are investing in 50 plus companies right now. And so you really do have globally around the world, because you have offices in New York and offices in Singapore. You really do have your finger on the pulse of the entrepreneurs that are coming in. So the new wave of big ideas, things that will maybe be hitting the market in 5 years. So really the future. But also I want to ask you about the turning of the Titanic. You work with Tyson Ventures, which is part of Tyson Foods. How much are the old school mainstream meat and dairy industries waking up to this arena?
Sure. So as you said, Tyson Foods is an investor in our fund. Part of the reason is they are focused on, and this is my interpretation. They need to obviously speak for themselves, but Tyson Ventures are focused on their consumers, and they're focused on their customers. They're focused on giving them the products that they're asking of them. Every conversation I've ever had with Tyson is always focused on, what are the consumers looking for, and how do we give it to them? Now, the interesting thing is they have a traditional heritage in animal protein, and they recently kind of came out and outlined that they were more in the protein business overall. So if that meant plant-based protein, and that's what their consumers were asking for, that's what they'd deliver. And we've seen Tyson coming out with new kind of plant-based products and a brand around that. So I think Tyson is indicative to some degree of the larger food industry. The larger food industry, particularly in, let's say, North America and Europe, is seeing that consumers are increasingly asking for plant-based products, plant-based solutions. The great thing about the entrepreneurial community is they have such a strong degree of creativity that they can bring plant-based foods to market as entrepreneurs, which may look and taste like the kind of animal protein of days gone by, but actually are made from plant-based ingredients. So in a funny sort of way, we can now have the best of both worlds. We can have the foods that we're culturally indoctrinated or taught to from early age, and also be eating plant-based foods, which are much better on the planet from a climate change perspective, and also from a personal health and animal welfare perspective. Entrepreneurs are giving us those new choices.
Yes, it's wonderful to see. And I'll add to that Tyson Ventures was an early investor in Beyond Meat. They made the colossal mistake of selling right before the IPO. And I would love to say that coronavirus is teaching people a lesson, but I actually think big business learns a lesson from losing money. And I think that lesson has stayed with them. So they've been very open to investing in plant-based options. And as you say, they've changed their name from a meat company to a protein company, as has Maple Leaf Foods, Cargill as well. So we're seeing some of the big players kind of want it both ways. They're not getting out of meat and dairy, but they're tiptoeing in, still to a much smaller degree, but plant-based options. Do you anticipate, we've seen some articles lately, Pat Brown of Impossible Foods is talking about meat and dairy being gone by 2035. Last September, there was an article in Bloomberg saying that plant-based options were going to be a $240 billion industry. Right now, we're going to say it's between 3 and 5. So that would be a big jump. But there's this expectation in the financial world that the shift is going to happen really quickly. Do you see meat and dairy actually going away?
So I don't see it going away as quickly as that. I do see entrepreneurs, as I said, coming up with new products which allow us to have the best of both worlds, in the sense of, we've got some great companies on board that create, plant-based milks that are just absolutely phenomenal. We've also got companies that have plant-based lamb, pork, and other kind of plant-based meat products. I can give you a whole list of companies that we've invested in that are bringing products to market that taste as good as, if not better than, the animal protein that they're replacing. Saying that, I still think that there's a group of, a significant group of consumers who are, culturally and have a cultural indoctrination to some degree, and have a habit that they formed. And the way we get around that, by the way, is by bringing those great foods, plant-based foods, to market, and getting them into people's mouths. Getting them into supermarkets, getting them into grocery stores, and getting them into people's mouths through demonstrations and so on, and having people almost surprised by how good they are. And I think that's one of the things that Beyond Meat has done incredibly well. They kind of moved the plant-based burger from the obscure kind of vegan, vegetarian areas of the grocery store and got it into the meat section, so that, for want of a better word, regular people, non-vegan, non-vegetarian people would be prepared to try it and take it home. And because the product is a good one, they'll repeat purchase it. So I don't know that it's going to be as quick as some people have suggested, but I do think that as entrepreneurs bring great products to market and we get them into more and more people's mouths, we'll be able to tip that scale.
Yes, it's wonderful. It is a process, most definitely. I always feel that when Beyond Meat hit the market, it was like the dawn of the automobile. There's just no going back. And I do always say this. I see my sister, Michelle Alfano, is on this feed, but I do always say consumers are so wildly valuable and powerful, because you watch television and you think, well, maybe politicians control everything, but actually everyone is after your dollars, and you are so incredibly powerful. And when you align your purchasing power with your personal values, you will see the market shift that way. And this is what I love about business. It really does respond to that. At the same time, there's this enormous pressure on mainstream businesses, I'll call them, meat and dairy, to be better with the limited resources that they have, which is land and water. And as you go from a planet of 7 billion people to almost 11 billion people, you're not getting more land and you're not getting more water. So there's this dual pressure from consumers and also from the environment to shift, which is so beautiful. My next question for you is, you do have offices in Singapore and in New York. Mm-hmm. And your finger in, 50 plus different businesses. I keep hearing, I would expect China with 1.4 billion people to be and all of the recent trade difficulties that they've had, which has, not having a solid food source has put them in a weak spot there. And then coronavirus issues, which have come from meat-borne pandemics, et cetera. I expect China to be on the forefront, but I keep hearing that Singapore is really this hotbed for plant-based. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. Singapore is an absolute kind of focus or hub for plant and cell-based innovation in Asia. And part of the reason why is they are just so dedicated to working with entrepreneurs and with investors and building that ecosystem. They're a great company. They're a great country in terms of the ease of doing business. The rule of law is very well established. Their kind of respect for IP is very well established. They invest in the category and in the industry. They bring the infrastructure to bear. Their transportation system is phenomenal. Their people are incredibly well educated, incredibly well trained. It's just people sometimes call it the kind of Switzerland of Asia because it's just so well designed and so well put together as a country. I can't say more kind of pleasant things about Singapore and its role in this industry.
I'm so terribly sorry. My internet connection went out there for just a little bit. I heard the end of it, that they are a wonderful country to deal with, how supportive they are and how organized they are, and that they have a lot of entrepreneurs there. I apologize if I'm making you repeat something. Is it also because of how central they are and how neutral they are? You mentioned Switzerland. Well, or is it just their business conditions?
Well, so the reason I mentioned Switzerland is because what I mean is they're very well organized. It's a very kind of well organized country. The infrastructure is very well put together. The people are very well educated. They respect the rule of law, of IP protection. A lot of the large food corporates that you've mentioned have head offices in Singapore. And yes, it's just a really phenomenal place to do business, both in terms of their commitment to business and entrepreneurs and their support of them. They've been incredibly supportive of us over the last 2 to 3 years since we've started our relationship.
That's wonderful. I think here in the US we think that it's all coming out of the US, and that's not the case. So I'm wondering, from the Asian perspective, are they pushing more on the plant-based food side or the cellular agriculture side?
So I would say it's both. We're seeing some interesting companies coming through in both plant-based and cell-based. We recruited a company from Australia in our last cohort that's doing some phenomenal plant-based cheeses called Grounded. We have a company out of Hong Kong, which is called Future Meat with a PH instead of an F. They are doing a phenomenal plant-based pork product that looks and tastes like regular pork, and you can use it in multiple dishes, but is all very much plant-based. So it's a combination. Here's an interesting one. We had the first cell-based company coming out of France, and they wanted to relocate their kind of core business operations to Singapore because they believe their main market for their product is actually China and Japan. So Singapore is a really good base for them to kind of introduce their product to the Chinese, the Japanese market, and kind of as a central hub for that. And that's a French company. So, Singapore's attracting European businesses as well as Asian ones.
Well, I'm so happy that entrepreneurs are focusing on Asia, because the consumption of meat is actually on decline in Western Europe and in America, but that's not the case with China and India becoming wealthier countries. So I'm really happy that there's this focus on Asia to have a healthier, more stable, more safe food supply. So you touched on this a little bit, and I did want to get to your roster to the extent that you can share this information with us about the entrepreneurs that are coming to you. So as simply put, what is the next big idea? But maybe I'll ask it in a more concrete way. Are you seeing more entrepreneurs come to you? So are you seeing more people get into this space? And then how creative are people getting? Is it simple replacement, beef for beef, pork for pork, or what kind of creativity are you seeing?
That's a fantastic question. So we kind of opened our doors in October for investment, but to all of the wonderful companies around the world, and we said, come come find us. We want to give you money and we want to help you. When we opened our doors, we didn't know if we were going to get a trickle or a deluge. The reality is that we ended up getting something like 250 companies from around the world saying, help us. And they're a combination of plant-based and cell-based. We've just opened our doors for a second time for our second cohort. We're currently going through that interview process of those businesses. And again, similar number, new companies, net new from in October. Phenomenal businesses. I mean, really incredible businesses from around the world just coming up in this space. In terms of, are they just, more burgers and more, duplicates of what we've already seen? Absolutely not. Think of it in these terms. If you take a kind of map of all of the different foods in the food industry, I think I lost you.
Hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes
you're
the
back.
pictures move around, but I didn't realize you couldn't hear me when I move. Okay, I'll stay put.
Got it. No, don't worry. COVID, I'm sure everyone's been very, very happy. So what I was saying was, it's not just more burgers or more sausages or whatever. Think of it in these terms. If you take the entire food map and you put all of the different products that are, in the food industry, and you take all of those foods that either include an animal protein as a main product or as a sub-product, all of those foods are replaceable by plant-based or cell-based, foods, and will be over the next, decade. What that means is we've seen, brands popping up in burgers. We've seen brands popping up in milks and yogurts. But there's so many more product categories and so many more product, SKUs that can be recreated and replaced and improved upon with plant-based and cell-based innovation. And thankfully, there are the entrepreneurs out there who are saying, when they're looking for something in the market that doesn't exist, instead of just sitting on their sofa and complaining about it, they're saying, screw this, I'm going to go to the commercial kitchen and I'm going to play around and I'm going to create something that I want. And maybe I'll find 10 friends or 100 friends or maybe 1 million friends that want to buy that product also. And thankfully, there's enough people out there who are not satisfied with what they've been delivered by the traditional food companies so far, and they're making those products themselves. It's just the passion and the creativity is amazing.
I love that you say this because, of course, we all think of burgers and milk, or maybe yogurt. But of course, think of all the times you've actually read the ingredient label and it said whey. And you said, oh my gosh, the whole product's now ruined because it's got whey in it, So there's all those sub-products that go into making products, not to mention the snack category. There's a whole big snack category as people are on the move and constantly, so it's the frozen section, it's the snack category. And then of course it's big meat and dairy.
Can I say one thing really, really fast?
Please.
I apologize. So in Asia, they have a whole range of different foods, a whole range of different tastes. In America, the burger is king. In Asia, the dumpling is in different cultures, the dumpling is king. And yet there's so many different tastes, so many different cultures in Asia that have their own food stuff, food products. So one of the companies we invested in, as an example, called Karana, is creating Asian style food with whole plant-based ingredients that replicate animal-based cultural foods. Because in China, it's not about the burger, it's about the dumpling. So if you want to take plant-based meats to China, you don't launch Beyond Meat necessarily. You launch the product that everybody's eating every day, and that's the dumpling. Or at least in some regions within China, it is obviously.
Yes, David Young has been on this show, founder of Omnivore. So we on this show are familiar with the importance of the dumpling and replacing pork with plant-based pork, of course. So you might know Lisa Faria of Stray Dog Capital.
Of course.
So she was on this show and we had a quick conversation and she said this in jest. So I'll say it and then let me explain it. There's just crazy, stupid money out there. And what she meant was not that it's stupid to be investing in plant-based, but that Beyond Meat hit and the world just did a double take and they couldn't believe it. And they just started throwing money at it. Are you seeing the same, that people just want to join your fund?
Well, so from our point of view, at least from what I saw with Beyond going through the IPO, it had two key consequences. The first was suddenly people woke up to the fact that this is a real category, that there's a real demand out there. Consumers are wanting these products. They're demanding these products, definitely in North America, increasingly in Europe, and increasingly in more international centers in Asia. And interestingly, the Chinese government came out in the last 2 to 3 weeks to say that they're going to move their country more towards plant-based as well. And when the Chinese government says something, they generally
do it.
They generally do it. So on the one hand, Beyond made people aware that this is real. This is a real category. People, want these things. The second thing it did was it sort of smacked to some investors as kind of the 1980s dot-com bubble. So you had some investors saying, is this real? Is this hype? Is this a real market? Is this going to go away in 6 months? Is it going to go away in 2 years? So it made some people jump in, and I think it made other people skeptical. What I think we need to do as investors is look at where the consumers are going. And let's bring it back to the large food companies you mentioned right in the beginning. They are in the consumer serving business, and they're very, very good at it. They've been doing it for, in some cases, hundreds of years. They will go where their consumers tell them to go. In this case, the consumers are telling them to go plant-based and telling us to go plant-based. And it's not about, Beyond having an IPO of a certain number. It's about consumers saying, give us more plant-based foods because it's better for the climate, it's better for animals, and it's better for our personal health.
Yes, and I also think they must be doing the math in the background and seeing that, animal agriculture, as we both know, is not a good business equation. It's a very inefficient, not very fruitful, if you will, business equation. You can make a lot more money with plant-based, and then there's all the sustainability issues, and then there's the consumers who really, particularly millennials, et cetera, but also older generations that are concerned about their health. There's so many areas that have been attacked if you're meat and dairy, because it's not great for the environment. It's also not great for our health. And then, of course, the animal welfare issues. So it seems that we've reached a point of no going back. Every once in a while, I'll see an analyst who says this is a trend. And I think, oh, you poor thing. They're going to get slammed so hard. Well, so let me ask you personally at Big Idea Ventures, what are you looking for in an idea? For you to take someone on, and I don't mean this at all to be disparaging, but I sort of think a little bit of Big Idea Ventures as like venture capital, the ride, because you bring people in from the beginning and you take them through the whole process. And then when they're ready and you've worked with them enough and they can scale up, that they have the venture capital fund right there. So what are you looking for when you're going to spend, I believe, $125,000 in actual cash and $75,000 with in-kind donations in the accelerator before funding them to the tune of potentially millions? So what do you look for?
Wow. So there's so many different elements to that. There's the kind of person element, i.e. the team, the leader, the mission, what they're kind of trying to achieve. But part of the reason why we established our first office in Singapore and also in New York at the same time was we want to back companies that are going to have a global impact. We're looking for businesses that can change the world for the better with their food, with their innovation, and with their mission. So at some point soon, I anticipate we'll have a third office in Europe because, ultimately we want to bring not just a product that's successful in North America or a product that's successful in Singapore or China, but a product that actually spans each of the key marketplaces and delivers a global community of products that are deliciously tasty at the right price point and are better for the climate, better for animals, better for personal health. I think, the reason we called the company Big Ideas is because we're looking for those big ideas. We're looking for businesses and companies and teams that can, change the world.
I love that you do this. Just a note to people, before I said that you are wildly powerful as the consumer, and please know that change never happens with governments. China might be the exception when they lay down the law, but in the Western world, change happens because of consumers. So please do not wait for your governments. These are the superheroes, the entrepreneurs who are out there on the front lines and the investors funding them. These are the superheroes, and that's how we get change. So continue to vote for them with your dollars. Is it really 50-50 plant-based and cellular agriculture? How do you see that shift? I mean, both of them are so powerful and important. How do you see that shaking out?
So I've got, my opinions are different than other people's in my industry. I've had discussions with Bruce and other people about, how all this
Friedrich, Good
Food
Institute.
over in GFI. So my personal opinion is that the plant-based foods are more short-term, medium-term products. In other words, I don't think a parent going into a grocery store and looking at a plant-based product will have any reticence. I think it seems more natural. It seems more kind of consumable, less scary. I find the idea of cell-based meat, i.e. meat that is grown not in a farm or on an animal skeleton, but in a lab, is actually a little bit scary for most people. And I worry about the average consumer walking into a grocery store, seeing a bank of steaks at some point in the future, and knowing that they weren't grown in the traditional way, but actually were grown in a factory or a lab. I think most consumers are going to be nervous about that. And I think part of that nervousness will come about through the kind of anti-GMO / anti-science aspect of our food industry, where the consumer's thinking that everything needs to be organic and grown in a farm. And so cell-based, I think, we're going to have challenges with cell-based. I think we're going to have challenges, not in terms of whether we can do it, because we're getting there, but in terms of whether consumers will buy it, whether there's a market at the end of the rainbow.
I think it's very interesting what you say. First of all, just to be clear, we are probably about 5 to 10 years out, really, for any kind of main scaling up of cellular. So it's not on the forefront right now. And so right now, I think it is very scary to people as a concept. But this is why, as powerful as consumers are, there is this partnership between consumers and companies, because when big advertising budgets get behind products, you'll be amazed how quickly something that can give you heart disease and erectile dysfunction is thought of as the manly thing that men must eat. Well, that's all advertising. That's why many, there's this pressure to be a manly man and eat meat. So if there's an advertising campaign behind the safety of cellular meats, cultured meat, and how not wasteful it is and how efficient it is for feeding the planet. I mean, it really, of the two ideas, it really is the smartest of them, but there's just a little information that needs to happen between now and when it actually comes to market, I think.
So there's a couple of elements to that. One is from a cell-based perspective, you're going to have the counter advertising and the counter fear of the industry coming from the traditional meat industry. Not necessarily the big animal protein companies who are making that shift in terms of their kind of product set, but maybe the medium-sized, lower down guys, they'll be spending money on creating as much fear and confusion as possible around the cell-based. So consumers, when there's a change ahead, will generally stay with what they're familiar with. So I think it's going to be tough to get the end market for cell-based. However, and I've had this conversation many, many times before as well, if the industry has a shock to the system where people stop trusting the traditional meat industry and the meat system, i.e. they no longer trust farms, they no longer trust the current normal way, then they will look at clean meat and maybe see a way that is actually safe, because it doesn't include feces and it doesn't include butchering and slaughter. It doesn't include all of the negative sides of the equation.
Hormones, antibiotics.
Absolutely, all of those things. So, and I've always said the only way people are going to move to clean in large numbers is if they stop trusting the traditional approach. And what are we seeing in the last 3 to 4 weeks?
Absolutely.
A shock to the system where people are starting to distrust the traditional approach.
Godspeed. That's all I can say. Let me ask you, as you, get applications for people to join your accelerator program, Big Idea Ventures, what tips would you give to anyone who's about to apply or to a plant-based entrepreneur in general?
Goodness. So in terms of applying to us, just come along and apply. We don't, we are looking for fantastic companies. We're looking for great businesses in the cell-based, plant-based space. We're looking for people that, we're going to have a long-term relationship with. These are not relationships where we put a little bit of money in and then we forget about them in 6 months' time. We are going to continue working with you, helping you as a company for the life of the business until you exit, whatever that might look like. In terms of, suggestions to entrepreneurs, I've been an entrepreneur many, many times. Not quitting is not quitting is generally the kind of biggest advice I've ever had, because so many times I've just been at the end of my rope in terms of my business, my company, my product. And I just kind of ground through it. And eventually, if you think about the consumer at the end, at all times, if you're focused on who you're serving, eventually you'll be able to have a great business at the end of the process.
I will add to that, as an entrepreneur myself many times over, that I always found, even if you are being funded by a third party, those who are the most successful aren't necessarily the smartest or the wealthiest or the most good looking or the most talented. They are the ones who are willing to work the hardest, and they are the ones who can make their money last the longest.
Yeah, money is oxygen.
It really is oxygen.
Money is oxygen, and as soon as you run out of money, you suffocate. You're done.
That's right. That's right. So let me ask you, because I was thrilled to see on your website, Big Idea Ventures, you talk a lot about the impact of meat and dairy on climate and on one's health, and also animal welfare. Are you an ethical vegan, or how did you come to this space? No judgment, just curious.
Yeah. How did I come to this space? So I am not a vegan. I am absolutely not a vegan. So how did I come to this space? I hit 50 years old, and I basically knew I had about 10 years work ahead of me. And I wanted to stop focusing on making money and, paying for mortgages and school fees and braces for children and those sorts of things that most people spend their lives worrying about. I'd kind of gone through that, and now I wanted to focus on, okay, I've got 10 years. What can I do that will make my 17-year-old daughter live in a better world than she lives in today? And she kind of looks at us and my generation almost accusatory as, what have you left me? What have you done? And I want to make sure that the next 10 years is about not the 2-degree change in temperature and the impact on global warming and rising water and all those sorts of things. I'd like to try and, by treating animals better, by bringing plant-based, cell-based foods to not vegans necessarily, not vegetarians necessarily, but, people like my brother who wouldn't be seen dead eating food like that. I want regular people to be loving the food because it tastes better than the products they're replacing and are at a price point that makes sense and are ubiquitous and readily available. Part of the reason why I'm not a vegan, just sort of answering that question, is I've spent 45, 50 years eating, meat, and it's not easy to quit. And I know the vegans out there are basically gnashing their teeth and telling me how horrible I am. But my goal is to make these foods, plant-based foods, so readily available that anyone can eat them, and they never need to touch another piece of meat again because they're satisfied and they're happy with the plant-based products that are out there and available.
Well, I'll just comment and say that life is, of course, about progress for the planet, progress for all of us, and progress on the individual level. So, every day we do a little better. And clearly, I just need to cook for you and your brother, because then you wouldn't go back. You'd always be vegan. Do you remember if there was one point in time? So you've given us the general rationale, which I understand, but I'm wondering, was there one point in time your daughter said this to you, or you were in the grocery store, or was there one moment that you said, that's it, I'm doing plant-based investing?
So the thing that scares me most of all about the future that we have as a species is climate change and its impact on food supply and basically our ability to survive on this planet. So my first and foremost driver in everything that I do, from a working with company perspective, investing perspective, is that climate change piece. Mm-hmm. I've been fortunate to live 52 years and I've had a phenomenal, wonderful life, and I'm very grateful to the planet for giving me that. I'm really scared about whether my daughter's going to hit 52, whether she's going to be able to get there without riots and challenges and all sorts of other things. So there wasn't a specific moment as much as an awakening to the fact that we deserve to give our children and their children a world that's better than when we arrived here, and not worse. And the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks that we've all been experiencing is just the precursor to what is coming, unless we wake up and start being a lot smarter about what we do and how we do it.
I couldn't agree more. I am also 52, and I will say there aren't a whole heck of a lot of benefits to getting older, but there are some. And one of them is when I turned 50, I said, yeah, make it count or forget it. I'm not here to waste time, people. I'm here to change shit. Let's make a difference. So I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate all you do, because really entrepreneurs and those who fund them really do move the needle. I'm wondering, what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
That's I've never been asked that before. What do I wish I'd have known? The funny thing is, you mentioned something earlier that sort of resonated with me, i.e. that people can basically, when people pull their wallets or their purses out of their back pockets and they make a purchasing decision, they're making a vote for what matters in terms of the companies and the products that should survive, should be around. Mm-hmm. So the thing I wish I'd have known 10 years ago that I know now is we all have these little micro decisions on a daily basis, and they add up. Yes. So the reason why I'm, if I'm generous, 30 pounds overweight, is because of every single little tiny micro decision I've made, poor micro decision I've made every single day. So it's not about, waving the flag and being a good person on a Sunday or on a Saturday, although that helps. And I love the kind of, David's cause of having a green Monday. It's about all of those tiny little micro decisions we make in terms of our health, our exercise, the food we consume, the products we put on our backs, the shoes we put on our feet. It's all of those tiny little micro decisions, those little votes that we're making for the companies that should exist in our world, and those that shouldn't.
So vote well, everybody. Vote with your dollars and align them with your values, and that purchasing power aligned with what you believe in personally will literally change the world. I'm wondering if there's a phrase that you live by. Let's say you've had a bad day, you've just been flying around the world and just nothing has gone your way. Is there one phrase that you say to yourself to get you back in the spirit? I like to say, nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky.
Got it. Not so much of a phrase as, I don't recall if it was my father, but I think it probably was. The idea that it's not how you deal with life when things are going well, it's how quickly you get up when you're knocked down. We are all going to get knocked down multiple times in our lifetime. Sometimes it seems that the thing that's knocked us down is trying to keep us down. It's almost the thing that's going to not let us get back up again. And the strength of character that we have as individuals is how quickly we can get back up and keep going. And it's that sort of it's that sort of approach that I appreciate in myself and try and cultivate in myself. My daughter created one the other day that I thought was kind of cute. she basically said, good happens. Now we've done the Forrest Gump, shit happens. And she's like, Dad, good happens. And I'm like, I actually like that. I think that's more of a bumper sticker than, the Forrest Gump bumper sticker that we're all familiar with.
I like that. Wonderful. Let me ask you in closing, and this is maybe unfair, you probably get it all the time, but I feel like I must. Okay, we know your predictions for the future. The world is going plant-based, maybe not 100%, but you really see cellular agriculture coming to the forefront, and more than anything, plant-based analogs for plant-based options for meat analogs being readily available worldwide, and you, sir, are helping to make that happen. Thank you. Is there one big idea you can put your finger on? Like, a while ago, nobody was talking about plant-based eggs, and now you see just in Asia and having more and more exposure around the world. Is there one thing you say, let's say for the rest of 2020, what's going to be the one thing that really pops up from behind?
So I wouldn't say it's a particular product. What I would say is it's the realization that we can all be entrepreneurs, and we can all create that product that we want to see. We don't have to wait for somebody else to invent it or to come up with it if we want it ourselves. If there's something we want, if there's something we need, if there's something that isn't in the store, go into the kitchen and figure out how to make it, and maybe find 10 friends, 100 friends, 1 million friends that want it also. So this is the decade of the entrepreneur. The next 10 years will be this is the first time in my lifetime that there's a whole new category in the food space. With beverages, multiple times we've seen iterations within beverages, but this is a whole new category. It's a white space, and it's begging for individuals to kind of come up with new products, new ideas. So it's not a new product in the next 12 months that I'd be pointing to. It's a decade ahead of the entrepreneurs who are going to change the whole face of what the food industry is all about.
Okay, everybody, you heard him. You have your marching orders. Get to making new products. I want to thank Heather Hennick for joining me, Michelle Alfano, Tom Vinsel. I see a long list of here. Kim Delgado. Hi there, Kim. Heather, again, thank you. I'm seeing everyone's comments. Fred Green. I'm sorry if I'm missing out on anybody. Author Claude, The Source Hill. Hey, Brendan Wallace. So many of you here. If I'm forgetting anyone, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to scroll really quickly through the list. Thank you all for commenting and for being with us here today. This was an odd time. Usually we are 1 p.m. Pacific, and that would be 4 p.m. Eastern, but today we were off a little bit. But I want to thank everybody for being with me. Mostly, I thank Andrew Ive, general partner and founder of Big Idea Ventures. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for really leading the way here and for making a difference and for putting yourself on a time frame. You've got 10 years to change the world, and thank you. I believe you will.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate it. What a wonderful show.
Thanks, everybody. I will see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Thanks. Together we are changing our health and the health of the planet. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.